All right, guys. Next up, we're going to talk about a little Sony Bend. Now, Colin. Yeah. You know a lot about Sony Bend.
I have a weird obsession with Sony Bend. Actually.
Yes. So
well chronicled.
What happened today? Once my computer gets up.
I like how you just pound on the mouse pad over and over again. It's like
hit the power button.
nothing works, so you just pound on it over and over again. There you go. Now you got the red keys. You're all set.
There we go.
Tim doesn't understand computers.
I don't.
He's adorable.
All right.
Type in your password. Have you ever used this computer before?
No password. Hold on.
He's never used this computer, Colin.
He's never used a computer ever.
All right, so on Reddit today, a former employee of Sony Bend
claimed former employee.
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. So
Allegedly.
Then there was a thread on NeoGAF here where someone said, will there be a new siphon filter? And he goes, no, don't hold your breath on that one. Source, I worked at Sony Bend for 8 years. John Garvin got burned out on siphon filter. He wanted to make something different. People seem to ignore that Gabe Logan died at the end of Logan's Shadow. Spoilers.
You son of a bitch.
Garvin literally killed off the main character, so he wouldn't have to make any more siphon filter games.
Yeah, hold on, though. I mean, in defense, as someone who reviewed this game and loved and played it back to front, maybe I think I reviewed this one, or me or Jeff, but we both played it back to back. Like it's not like a definitive everyone's standing over his grave.
Yeah,
it's like they walk out of the bar, or they're like their training unit or whatever, and Gabe's shot, and then Leanne is over him screaming Gabe, and then it like fades to black. She's like Gabe, and like oh, how definitive he's dead. No, because that
would seem more like a cliffhanger.
Exactly.
And it says, plus, despite all the praise, they didn't sell. Very low sales all around.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sad but true. Who would have thought PSP games?
The PS1 ones did fine, but
yeah, but then that franchise.
Yeah, they kept turning them around pretty quickly after that.
I remember I had a demo of one of the PS1 games that came on a Pizza Hut demo disc, and I played that thing so much. And then there was a demo of the third game, I think it was second or third game, and all it was the opening part where you jump out of the plane with a parachute, and it was you land on the snowy mountain. And you just go through that. I played that like 100 times.
Yeah.
I'll never know what the rest of that game looks like.
Demo discs are awesome.
Yeah.
Miss those days.
Something special. But anyway, so they're talking about no siphon filter. Then he also talks about how they were going to make, like this company made the Vita Uncharted game. And they're talking about how there was talks about making another one of those, maybe a Infamous game on Vita or whatever. Yes. Colin, do you have a little more insight into this? What do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think... Sony Bend, I think, is like one of the hidden gems kind of Sony studios in the sense that, yeah, they made siphon filters. They made 7 of them, I want to say. 7 siphon filters.
Sounds right.
In a row. And this goes back to when they were called Idadic. I think they weren't even Sony Bend at the time before Sony bought them. And they're just in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. And they make games or whatever, and eventually they got off of Siphon Filter and they made, we're forgetting that they made Resistance Retribution,
which was awesome.
Yeah, and that was obviously like another studio's game, and Insomniac made Resistance, and Resistance Retribution was kind of like a third person. Sure, what was the guy's name?
James Grayson.
It
was great, man. It was so much fun.
Yeah, people really liked that game a lot.
A great third person shooter on PSP.
And then they made Uncharted, Golden Abyss, and they did a really nice job with someone else's story. In this case, Naughty Dog. So this particular rumor from the alleged ex-Bend employee is saying that they wanted to make another Uncharted, and that Naughty Dog didn't really want them to because they were afraid of franchise fatigue, and that makes sense to me. I believe that Uncharted Golden Abyss sold exceptionally well. One of the best-selling, if not the single best-selling game on Vita.
Makes sense.
Over 1 million. MPD confirmed to me. A long time ago, I emailed them about a story or whatever, and they did confirm that Uncharted did over 1 million units. But I'm not sure if that's worldwide. I'm not sure if that's only in the United States. I'm not sure if that's digital or retail. Who the hell knows? It's a lot of units for especially back when Vita was really, Vita's always been struggling, but when there was very few Vitas. So a lot of people bought Uncharted. It's not surprising that Sony would want another one. What's more interesting is that Greg and I think especially me, have been talking for a long time about how Infamous needed a game on Vita, and that it made a lot of sense to put Infamous on Vita, and why isn't Infamous on Vita? It doesn't make any sense, and especially with Cole and PlayStation All Stars.
That was our big plan. That was our big scheme of why this is happening.
Yeah, and
they're still pushing him,
and especially with Second Son, where Cole is literally like
spoilers.
Spoilers about Second Son if you haven't played it. Like Cole is literally nowhere to be found in that game, which was like really, really surprising to me because I was like, he's got to be like I waited until the end of that game. I'm like, he is definitely in this game. He is the bad guy in this game.
I was expecting like a post-credit sequence of just like crackling lightning or whatever as he walks up on Delston spray painting.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that they had some weird mixed plans for Infamous that then come to fruition, and who knows what Sucker Punch is going to do with Infamous if it's going to continue or if another studio will do it. I mean, I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen with that too. But so it makes sense. I believe everything he's saying. I also believe that when you work at a studio like Bend that made their own game and made their own product like Siphon Filter for a really long time, and then got well known as taking good care of other people's IP, that eventually you kind of to inspire your people, you got to make something original again. And it's probably for the health of the studio that they make their own game. We've known that Bend has been working on a PS4 game for a long time, and every Sony-owned studio is working on a PS4 game.
Says Shuhei Yoshida.
So yeah, Shuhei Yoshida himself says that. So even studios like Bend or like Sony Cambridge or some other studios that you might expect would be working on Vita games are actually working on PS4 games. It's not to say that they're not also working on Vita games.
So they probably aren't working on Vita.
Well, I think it is very safe to assume that Studio Japan is working on Vita games.
Sure.
But probably Gravity Days too, and whatever else.
Patapon.
So I don't know, man. It's interesting. It's always interesting to hear something out of Bend because they are the quietest Sony studio and I think the most overlooked Sony studio. I would have expected that they would be much closer to showing their game than they are. Let's not forget that Golden Abyss went gold
for the Japanese.
Yeah, in fall of 2011, and it was a launch game in Japan. I have the Japanese version, and it's just the English version. So they've not
black market.
So they've not released a game for 12. Like it's been like 3.5 years. Like they should definitely be well on their way. But it seems like they lost a lot of time in pre-production.
I was gonna say, how much do you think it was that they were working on Uncharted Golden Abyss 2, and then they're like no, and then they started doing pre-production on Infamous, and then it was like no. Mm-hmm. That seems like there's a lot of logic to what could easily be a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, Colin and I could sit here and spin a whole bunch of rumors on why something's happening at Evolution. You'd be like, "Oh, it kind of makes sense."
I mean, but what he's saying makes sense in the sense that I mean, maybe he's lying and he just knows this, knows the way developers work really well, but that they made and scrapped a bunch of demos for the Uncharted sequel on Vita. The sequel to Golden Abyss. That takes time and resources to make.
Yeah.
And I know that they worked really intimately with Naughty Dog and Amy Hennig at the time to make Golden Abyss. A lot of the resources and assets in that game come from Naughty Dog. So, that makes sense. The Infamous thing makes sense. Sucker Punch kind of controls that. And if they're going to make an Infamous game right around the time when Second Son comes out, that's probably not a good look. That makes sense.
This goes back to the thing we're talking about, franchise fatigue, right? Mm-hmm. Of like, get another Golden Abyss or whatever out, and then it's like, well, no, we have Uncharted 4 coming. It needs to be a big deal. There has to be a gap there. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, we'll get an Infamous out. Well, no, we're launching Second Son. There needs to be a gap there.
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing that he says in there is that they've had a lot of brain drain there, and that doesn't surprise me either. Considering again, you have to inspire your people to do their own IP. It's probably not very fun to be a studio outside of Naughty Dog, for instance, and write an Uncharted game and have to pass everything through them because they control that IP. So everything makes sense in there. I just think we're closer than farther away from seeing what they're working on. Yeah.
So this idea of franchise fatigue, do you think that every franchise can hit that? Or are there some games that can just come out whenever they want and it's fine?
I think for me it comes down to, yes, everything can hit that, period. It depends on what you're selling. I think we see Call of Duty every year, right? And people it's maybe waning a bit, yada, 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 but it's not tanking, right? It's not doing
plateauing.
It's not doing Guitar Hero, nosedive or anything like that. And that's because that's a franchise that's based on online and tight gameplay, right? It's not based on story and character in this, right? And that's when you start moving around these different, from Black Ops to Advanced Warfare or whatever, you start getting around different characters and different storyline. The antithesis of that for me, and I think a lot of gamers, clearly by the numbers, is Ratchet and Clank. So many Ratchet and Clanks on PS2, and then they fucking kept coming on PS3, and then by the time they realize something's wrong, they're like, well, now we'll do all for one. Now we'll put them into different scenarios and different kind of games, and people were like, no, stop. You know what I mean? And like they stopped, and now they're not rebooting, but they're remastering, building it from the ground up. Yeah. Like that's an example of like for sure franchise fatigue, right? Of like when your selling point is Ratchet and Clank, not Call of Duty, guns and whatever, and this and futuristic warfare or old school warfare or whatever. Yeah. When it's just like it's based on two characters, that totally becomes a thing. And I'm worried about that with not. I think the worry for that with Uncharted was real for 3. I think like we always talk about, right? If 3 would have come out as 2 and 2 would have come out as 3, the same thing would have happened where people were like, "Oh man, 3 so much better than, you know what I mean? Like you compare whatever game would have filled the hole of 3 would have been like, well, it's not as good as 2.
As the other one.
And so like now that we've had that, Uncharted 4 I think can easily supersede everything and be like, this is the best Uncharted, blah blah. But even then, it's like, all right, like how many more shenanigans can Drake get into and us not get sick of them?
Mm-hmm. So do you think that with the Vita game specifically, the franchise fatigue can also hit when it's a console game versus a handheld game, even if they're different games?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would take it a step further than Greg. Nothing is immune to franchise fatigue. Nothing. And it's not only franchise; it's types. Like we talk about with superhero movies and superhero TV shows and all this stuff. Nothing is immune to like hitting a saturation point. You can see it everywhere. Like saturation points just being hit everywhere. The thing is that companies won't stop until they hit it. Mm-hmm. It seemed like Sony was trying to be smart enough to be like, we don't want to hit it. Yeah. Uncharted is the most important thing we have, and we do not want to hit the saturation point with Uncharted because then we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Because that is our marquee title. That is our Halo, basically. And so you have to be smart with it. And I respect that. I mean, I think they know they could put an Uncharted out on Vita, another Uncharted, sell a bunch of Vitas and a bunch of copies of the game, but they don't see that it's worth it because it might affect Uncharted 4's bottom line, a game that could sell 10 million copies. You know, so it's an interesting problem to have. But yeah, nothing is immune to that kind of stuff. Like you push and you shove something down anyone's throat, as you're seeing with so much shit in nerd culture right now, and it's gonna rubber band. It's inevitable. It happens. It's going to happen. So it's smart that they manage it. I'd rather have too little than too much of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And you ask about, you know, is it still a thing from console to handheld? I think the problem you're always running into is the fact that inevitably there will be a large portion of gamers who assume that the handheld version is in fact worse. It's always going to be watered down. Mm-hmm. It is always this. I stand by that Peace Walker's still the best Metal Gear, right? And I can give you a laundry list of reasons, but I still get laughed at every time I say it. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how much I back it up and how much I really believe that. It's still like it's impossible. Metal Gear Solid 4 was a 10, and it's like, this is so much better than 4. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But like that's the problem, is like putting something on a handheld, you're already bringing down the quality of the graphics, this, that, and the other, and people are already going to sit there and go, well, it's nowhere near as good as we always talk about with Golden Abyss, right? That game has sold incredibly well, but it's still not talked about on that level, when in fact it's better than Drake's Fortune. You know what I mean? Like, it's a better game than Drake's Fortune. It does a lot of cool stuff that it doesn't get credit for.
It's by far a better game.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with. And I'm not trying to take a shot at Colin, because I usually do this in a joking fashion. I still think Resistance Retribution is probably my favorite Resistance. Resistance 3, I think, is a better game probably overall, but I enjoyed James Grayson and the Focus, especially compared to the Nathan Hale games. You know what I mean? Like, for my money, way better than 1 and 2, just because it was a good, the way it was based on the story and how much fun it was to experience, right? And just go through, but. Nobody talks about Resistance Retribution. Now, granted, nobody talks about Resistance usually, but
That's
even
the problem.
I know, even when we do, what a big dog, isn't in the conversation.
It'll come back one day. I feel it in my bones.
I can feel it coming.
That's a game that should be rebooted.
So, do you think that the Infamous is on that same level of Uncharted? Like, obviously, Uncharted is the Halo of Sony. But with the Infamous, like, can it have another Vita game? Like, should that have had another Vita game? Yeah,
that was weird. There's two IP, Sony-owned IP, that make no sense that they weren't on Vita. God of War and Infamous. And the fact that, like, neither of those games came to Vita is confusing to me, and I still don't believe it. Like, when, like, that one of those has to come. Like, it doesn't make any sense, you know? Infamous is certainly nothing's on the level of Uncharted, except for Gran Turismo in the Sony studio family of IP in terms of sales and prestige. And Infamous, especially Infamous, like, there's room for Infamous on Vita to tell a story that gaps 2 and Second Son, and there's certainly room in the God of War lore, even if they reboot it, to tell different stories with Kratos, even though Kratos is a boring character, in my opinion. So I was shocked. Like, I thought for sure Infamous would come to Vita. I was positive.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
Like, I was like, oh, I thought maybe it'd be like a second party studio doing it, like Double 11 or something. But I thought, like, I didn't think Sucker Punch itself was gonna make the game, but it is weird. It is very weird. But with Cole's inclusion in All Stars, Infamous 2 did really well and was critical success. Infamous Second Son sold really well. I think it was a way worse game than Infamous 2 and Infamous 1. But
agreed.
They want that series to be something. I don't think that series is going to go away. I just think it's a matter of, like, who does the next one. Mm-hmm. But it is strange that Infamous never came to Vita, and I think that I can understand the argument with Uncharted. I do not understand the argument with Infamous, and I certainly don't understand the argument with God of War. Because God of War hasn't had a real release since 2010. You know, so Ascension came out, but no one, you know.
But see, I wonder how much that was the problem. Is that Ascension came out and everybody's like, and it was like, ooh,
Like,
hold
was
on,
that
pump your
that point
brakes.
of franchise fatigue?
Well, or it
with
was
God of
right.
War?
It was about to be right.
Mhm.
Like it was about to be like that. All right, and the next one would be too much if it's not amazing. I think I don't think we'll get another Infamous game for quite a while. And I think I think Sucker Punch is gonna move in a different direction. I don't even think Sony's gonna hand Infamous off to somebody right away. I just think that when you think about Infamous, and I love Infamous, you know that. You know I'm a huge fan. Evidenced by the wall in the living room. That's all Infamous crap. Infamous, for the most part, has never had a home run game. There's games Colin and I love. A lot of people, The Second Son did really well in reviews, right? But it's never been in Uncharted, right? Mm-hmm. And they've always, I think it's been brought up in interviews before, and they've said, like, we're happy to be Naughty Dog's little brother or whatever. And it's like, nobody really wants to be the little brother. You know what I mean? And I'm sure PlayStation doesn't want to keep investing money in a franchise that hasn't hit out of the park, because eventually somebody's going to be like, why do they keep making these? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is the story? And like Infamous Second Son really doesn't end, in either ending for me at least, on a note of like, I can't wait to see what happens next.
It's like Delson was a boring character.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people know that.
He was no Cole.
He was no Cole. I served with Cole McGrath, sir. And you, sir.
That was so frustrating, wasn't it, when Cole wasn't in that game? I was so annoyed. I was authentically annoyed. I was really I remember because I beat it in Platinum before it even came out. And I was like, I can't fucking believe that Cole isn't in this game. He is nowhere in this game. You know?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, there's a sign that references McGrath's Cafe or whatever the hell it is, or electronics or whatever. I'm like,
Nah.
how can you just how is that character not the bad guy in this game? I do not get it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like that infuriated me. That said, First Light, the arena combat was fucking awesome. Was really, really awesome. Because the combat in those games,
yeah,
and the traversal is awesome.
Yeah, moment-to-moment gameplay Sucker Punch.
But yeah, the game, I was I don't want to say I was disappointed. I think Infamous Second Son was a great game, but compared to Infamous, especially Infamous 2 was so special. That was a special game, and Second Son didn't. You know, with how much they hyped that game, and it's clear they got extra time to finish it too, because it seemed like it was supposed to be a launch game, or a launch window game, which it was not.
It depends on, maybe they're using the Nintendo Windows.
very loose term of window. Yeah, so I don't know. So with this Bend stuff, we'll see. I'm excited to see what I know that those guys have talent. They've shown it with other people's stuff. I want to see what they can do with their own ideas. I think we'll see that game this year. I don't think it'll be released this year, but I think we'll see it. Yeah.
Good.
Cool.